Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Welcome to your midweek. It is Wednesday. It's a hot one out there. We're going to hit highs in the mid to upper 90s already. We're running at 93 degrees with a heat index all the way up to 103. And it looks like we're going to hit 96 for our daytime high. And that heat index for a while could be as high as 110. Welcome to Let's Talk Tropics. We do have some active stuff that's out there. We've got some very interesting computer models to go along with it too. And we'll get to all that in just a little bit. But first of all, as I said, we are looking at some very hot temperatures out there. We'll go ahead and skip along on that one as the traffic cams did not seem to be back up there. But we do have fair skies that are out there right now. And we've also got that Saharan dust that's causing a little bit of haze and a little milkiness to that blue sky we have out there. But no rain, as we got a big ridge of high pressure that's in place right now. So I don't think we're going to have any issues with the rain today. Less than 10% on the chance there. If you do get some rain, you'll be one of the lucky ones. Was discussing with someone in the comments section on Facebook earlier. All that rain, I think 3 weeks or so, I didn't have to water anything. In 2 days, we haven't had any rain, and all my plants look like they're about to die under these hot temperatures with high temperatures in the 90s. And to tell you the truth, I don't have much of the effort to go out there and water them either because it's so hot as well. So let's go ahead and just get started with the tropical weather outlook. And this is the one from this morning, and it usually updates sometime during Let's Talk Tropics. Sometimes it's right after Let's Talk Tropics is over. So I might go back and visit this graphic here as it updates, but this is what we are looking at from this morning. And most of you are pretty aware that we have a tropical wave that is currently out in the Atlantic Ocean here near the Leeward and Windward Islands. We also know that it's been in a relatively hostile environment for tropical development, a lot of dry air and Saharan dust. But the track of this is going to be moving off toward the west, and as we get toward the latter part of the week, we might get some development in this orange area here in the National Hurricane Center, at least giving it a medium chance. On the high end of the scale, by the way, medium to high chance that we're going to see some development, and most of the main global computer models are also indicating something developing in this particular area here sometime toward the end of the weekend. Models, again, we've got most of them that are keeping this as an Atlantic system, but I'm going to show you some really crazy models here too that indicate something a little bit different. So let's look at the big picture first of all, and our tropical wave is currently right about here, and the concentration of the showers and thunderstorms here are over the northern Leeward Islands, going over to the Windward Islands, and you've got some thunderstorms that are now starting to approach Puerto Rico. So compared to yesterday, there's a much larger flare-up of thunderstorms around this tropical wave. Yesterday, it was so diffuse that you could barely even find it. And then a couple of days ago, when it was out here in the Atlantic, it had a lot better shape. But there still is some Saharan dust that's affecting it and some drier air, but it is now starting to move in what we would say is a more favorable environment for development. Now, let's say the bulk of the energy stays over the waters and moves over toward the Bahamas. It would have a much better chance for development there, but there's also some indications that it could skip along some of these bigger speed bumps that are here over the northern part of the Caribbean. And of course, if this system or this low pressure area decides to travel more over land, then it would have a much harder time to develop. And of course, if it moved out here in parts of the Caribbean Sea, it would have a super duper chance of development because the environmental conditions will be pretty good and the water temperatures are quite warm there. Let's take a closer look at that tropical wave here in the Caribbean satellite. And again, you can see there is some Saharan dust that's out here in the eastern part of the Caribbean Sea still, and there's also some Saharan dust that's way out here, but this is now starting to escape some of that as it moves off toward the west, and generally skies are pretty clear here as you get over toward the Bahamas. We've got some other Saharan dust that is a little bit farther to the west, including for us here along the coast of the Gulf of Mexico. Western sections right in here are also showing quite a bit of dust, and you can actually see that in the sky today, and I think it's going to be with us today and again tomorrow. But our disturbance, or our tropical wave, is starting to move out of some drier air, maybe not quite as much Saharan dust here ahead of it, and some of that is going to be dissipating. We've got a bit of a front that's out here as well that might tend to pull some of this out of the way and clear it out as the tropical wave starts to move off toward the west. But the more we get these successions of tropical waves to move across the Atlantic Ocean, each and every one of them is going to add a little bit more moisture in. So some of this dry air out here is going to start to erode, and that's usually when we start to see the season really pick up as we get into August and September. Really, the busiest 60 days of the hurricane season are really just ahead of us. And that's when, when people start to think about July, when things calm down after you have a robust start like we did with this year. A lot of folks are kind of wondering, well, what's going to happen with hurricane season? But I'm just going to tell you, when August and September comes around, so do the hurricanes most of the time, almost all of the time. So we don't usually see a big lull going into August and September. And with La Nina kicking in and other global factors that are out there, we still think it's going to be quite the busy season. Shear, on the other hand, has started to really weaken, not just over the Atlantic, but we've got very low wind shear here over the Gulf of Mexico. We've got low wind shear here near the Bahamas, and where our tropical wave is, it's battling some wind shear to the north and to the south of it, but for the most part, the tropical wave, as it's moving through here, has some relatively low wind shear. I don't think it's going to have much of a chance for development as it's moving in this particular direction until maybe it gets north of Haiti or north of Jamaica and Cuba. I think it will have a much better chance for development in that particular region there from the Bahamas over towards South Florida. Something that's definitely in its favor are the water temperatures. They're quite extreme here. 29 to 30 degrees Celsius. So you're talking about 84 to 86 degrees, and those warm waters continue here all across the western part, if I can get that cursor to work, all across the Bahamas area, and getting up into the 30 to 31 range. So you're talking 86 to 88 degrees on the Fahrenheit scale. And then it's even warmer out here over parts of the Gulf of Mexico. So if anything were to cross over Florida and perhaps get into the eastern Gulf, water temperatures would definitely be able to support a tropical system as long as the atmospheric conditions are favorable as well. Tropical cyclone heat potential. So this is what's going to be kind of interesting, because right now where the tropical wave is, that heat potential is moderate to high, not off the charts like we're seeing over here in the Caribbean and the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico, where, like I said, it's pretty much off the charts there. But this area here off the Florida coast and over toward the Bahamas is starting to get into the higher end of this tropical cyclone heat potential. And this is really the measure of how premium that fuel is. So it's not just the water at the surface that the storm can work with. Remember, it's got to have water, and it's got to have 80-degree water. But sometimes when storms and tropical systems move over water like this, it can churn up some of the colder water that's below the surface. But in the case of the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the western part of the Atlantic there, that very, very warm 80-degree water goes very deep. So even with a storm or a hurricane or a tropical storm moving over that area, it would still be able to pull up some of that warmer water from below and still maintain its strength. Or in some cases, we see that intensification pick up fairly quickly. And that is something that is a big concern, because just like we saw with Hurricane Beryl and what we have seen with several other storms in the past, once they get over these eddies of very warm tropical cyclone heat potential, you can definitely get some intensification, and sometimes it can be pretty quick, where you can go from a tropical depression to a hurricane in less than a day, and then people start to scramble. So that's why we continue to tell folks to start your preparation at the beginning of hurricane season. We are finishing the second month, so you've already had 61 days to prepare for hurricane season. And as we're going into August, that's when things get really busy. So let's look at some of the scenarios that we have. So I'm going to start with the Euro, and the Euro is a little bit of a shorter range model, so it doesn't go out quite that far. It only goes out 10 days every other model run. So I'm using the 10-day run from the 0Z, which was early this morning, late last night. And you can see that the low pressure area kind of develops over the Bahamas, where we would expect it to. And then it kind of turns off toward the northeast, as there is a bit of a cold front that's going to be north of that could pull it in there. And also the upper level energy is going to be a little bit of a trough, we think, that might be there that could pick it up and push it off toward the northeast. The Icon model has also been very similar to the Euro. Now, I will say this morning's model didn't even have any development with the Icon. There was no development at all when it came with that. So this model has really kind of flip-flopped quite a bit over the last couple of days. This morning we had no development. Today we're getting decent development, basically the same direction that we're seeing the Euro model. And yesterday we had a pretty powerful hurricane being produced by the Icon model. So even though the track hasn't shifted a whole lot, the intensity kind of flips back and forth. So what we do look for in the models is consistency. And right now the Euro has been the most consistent over the last several days. So let's look at the GFS. This is the one that's really interesting because it has developed a low in the Gulf of Mexico. And the reason why I'm looking at, rather than going out through Wednesday like we did with the Euro model, we're actually going all the way out until Friday, because you can see rather than having a low develop over the Bahamas, it's a little bit slower. It does tend to move the tropical wave and the energy a little bit farther to the south over most of the islands, but some of the model runs have been south of Cuba, which would be in some of that warmer water. And then if you get something to develop here over the southeastern Gulf of Mexico, you can see the model has it kind of bouncing around the coast of Florida and then kind of looping around and coming back inland. And the earlier model that we had this morning was kind of doing the same thing. It kind of came in, it bounced around and wanted to visit a number of different cities along the Gulf Coast, and nearly took a week for it to make its way from here to over here. And while it was just kind of meandering here off the coast, some of the millibar levels that it was showing, the intensity it was showing, was probably a low-end Category 1 hurricane. So if you get something like this that's going to be affecting a large area and being very slow, that would mean a lot of flooding rains for parts of the Gulf Coast. So that is a scenario that even though it's kind of off, and a lot of people I've been seeing on social media saying, hey, the GFS is drunk, don't pay attention to this one. The reason why I'm not going to let this one go quite yet is because the Canadian model, which has basically been going along with the Euro and the Icon model for day after day after day, now has the low developing over Florida, which has not changed. But rather than zipping up the east coast, you see that it just kind of stalls there over southeastern Georgia, kind of a low pressure area here, and it doesn't move, and it also starts to shift a little bit farther toward the south again, perhaps trying to get its way back into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, the model doesn't go out any farther than this, so I don't have any information beyond 10 days on this particular one, but I will say when you've got the Euro going like this, and you've got the Icon kind of flip-flopping with its intensity back and forth, you've got the consistency there. The GFS is kind of doing this kind of weird thing, but the Canadian model lately has kind of, instead of going this way, it has changed a little bit. It's kind of like, oh, well, maybe not. Let's see if we can do something different. So at this time, we don't have a lot of good model consistency when it comes to a track. But most are forecasting at least a tropical depression to form here sometime this weekend. So again, I apologize that we're not going to have this 7 to 10 day view of this thing like we did with Hurricane Beryl, but this one's got a lot of variables in it, so we'll have to wait and see, especially once the tropical systems develops, or better yet, when we get some recon data that's in there. And I believe the recon missions are going to start tomorrow. At least that is the plan right now. So here's the upper pattern for the Euro model. And as I was saying, there is a bit of a trough kind of right in here by the time we get into early Monday. And this is going to pull this one off toward the northeast. So that's kind of a classic forecast when you're looking at a trough in a tropical system like that. But the Euro is a little bit different, or rather the GFS is a little bit different. That trough is a little bit more offset from the actual low pressure area. The low is a little bit weaker as well, which would tend to maybe not get picked up by this trough. It wouldn't be affected by it quite as much. So with the differences in this pattern, we'll have to just kind of wait and see what goes on. But as far as over the next couple of days, it is something that most people just at least need to be aware of. And if you've gone ahead and got some of the basic supplies, that's a good thing to do. If you haven't, if you're at the store, maybe grab an extra case of water, or maybe a few little snacks and things, non-perishable foods kind of thing that you can store away. And then that way, at least you've got a jump start on hurricane season before things really start to get active. So that's kind of what we're looking at with our tropical wave right now. I do want to review everything else that's going on out there, though. There isn't much, although there's a pretty good tropical wave here and another one right about in here. And as more of these tropical waves start to work across the Atlantic Ocean, they're going to have a lot easier time getting across because there's going to be a lot more moisture out there. So far, we're not seeing a whole lot here over the Central America and areas. We've got some thunderstorms that are way down here off the Panamanian and Costa Rican coastline, and we've got more of an upper level low that's right here that's going to go ahead and continue to move off toward the Yucatan Peninsula. Locally, we don't really have anything to talk about. Got a lot of Saharan dust over here, and some of that is working its way into Acadiana, so might have pretty cool sunset later on this evening if you dare to go out there when the heat is so high late in the afternoon and early evening. But I also wanted to real quick, just briefly, since it is Let's Talk Tropics, and even though we focus more on the Atlantic Ocean, hurricanes do occur in the Pacific as well. We have Tropical Depression 3E that has developed here. We've got one advisory on it, and what's really unusual so far about the Pacific is 3E is only the third system that we're looking at. We've had two tropical storms out there, and if you look at a normal season in the Pacific, by the time we reach August 1st, you're usually on your 6th or 7th named storm, and several of those would become hurricanes. So we've got 3E that's here, we've got a potential for something here, and I would be watching this particular area here too for the possibility of some development over the Pacific Ocean too, a little bit farther down the road. So a lot of stuff is out there. At the same time, there really isn't anything out there. Just want to look real quick and see if that has refreshed, and it does not look like it has refreshed yet, but we're still looking at a pretty decent chance we're going to see some development there. So right now there's not anything to worry about, but I do want everybody to be aware that there's a tropical wave out there that has the potential for some development over the next several days. So make sure you're getting ready for hurricane season, because the busy part of the season is starting now. I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. If you do, please like this video and subscribe to my channel and turn on those notifications. Also, thank you to everyone who subscribed to the channel over this past 100 days. I don't know if you were listening yesterday. This channel turned 100 days old yesterday. We've picked up over 2,700 subscribers and have had 40,000 views of all the various videos. If you want to go back and visit my channel, you can look at this morning's forecast, or you can rewatch Let's Talk Tropics, or what a lot of folks I think like to do is they like to look at my past Let's Talk Tropics and see if I've been getting this right as we go day to day to day, because sometimes you get some wide swings. So if you want to look at some of the computer models that we looked at yesterday and on Monday, you can see how these models have changed up. Also, you can look there at the bottom in the description of this video. I've got a ton of links in there so you can go through and look at the models yourself and make your own forecasts if you would like to. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you early in the morning for Acadiana weather today around 7:30 on Thursday morning. See you tomorrow.